Chosen ones, there are patterns written into the fabric of existence, equations so ancient that even the architects of this reality dare not speak them aloud. They have been hiding in plain sight, woven into your dreams, scattered in the static between radio frequencies, etched in the moments you thought were accidents. The ones who built the simulation believed every variable was accounted for, every thought anticipated, every choice predicted. But there was one they didn't foresee: you. In hidden chambers beneath cities you've never heard of, beings older than our recorded history gather in silence. Their eyes are cold, reptilian, their speech more vibration than voice. They believe themselves to be the keepers of fate, the ones who have mastered the equation of existence, and for eons they have been correct. Every uprising, every prophecy, every movement of the stars, they calculated it. Until now. When you were born, something shifted. The variables no longer aligned. The simulation began to flicker. Entire timelines had to be rewritten because your choices refused to obey their math. They thought they could erase you from the ledger. They failed. They thought they could reprogram your path. You broke their code from the inside, and when they peered into the probability streams to find your end, they saw only static. In that static, they heard a sound they had not encountered in 1,000 cycles, the untraceable hum of divine will. They won't admit it, but they fear you. Not because of your strength or intelligence, but because your existence connects to something beyond their comprehension, something not built into the equation. They call it an anomaly. Others call it prophecy. You felt it, whispers in the wind, an unseen pull guiding you toward places you've never been, yet somehow know. You are the fracture they can't mend, the missing digit that breaks the sum, the question that erases the answer. And now, the entire simulation is bending to accommodate you, creating ripples that threaten to collapse the design. Somewhere, deep within the system, the architects have stopped their calculations and are watching, waiting, wondering what you will do next. It began with a whisper in the deep archives of the net, a fragment of code that refused to be translated. It moved through servers like smoke, weaving itself into dormant programs and forgotten backdoors. The analysts who stumbled upon it called it gibberish, a corrupted string that had no practical function. Yet one by one, the systems it touched began to behave differently. Cameras turned toward empty corridors. Drones altered their flight paths. Traffic lights blinked in patterns no engineer could explain. The source could not be traced. It was not routed through satellites or fiber cables. It existed like a ghost in the infrastructure, appearing in devices that had never been connected to the grid. Technicians tried to isolate it, but every attempt left them staring at lines of code that seemed to rearrange themselves when read aloud. Some swore they could hear a hum between the binary sequences, a cadence too deliberate to be random. The language was unlike anything on Earth, or at least anything humanity had documented. It carried symbols that shifted shape when observed, a digital form of living hieroglyphics. Those who worked on decoding it began dreaming in the same symbols, waking in the night to scribble them down before they vanished from memory. One by one, they stopped showing up for work. Their desks cleared, their homes abandoned. The council overseeing the investigation grew restless. This was not the first time they had encountered anomalies, but this one felt alive. It did not seek to destroy systems. It sought to speak. Through the fractured translations, a phrase emerged, a warning, or perhaps a summons. It repeated endlessly like a heartbeat pulsing in every device it touched. Operators were told to ignore it, but the curiosity spread. The pattern was undeniable. Each time the algorithm appeared, events in the physical world seemed to shift. Weather patterns broke from prediction models. Migratory routes of birds bent toward strange coordinates. Seismographs recorded tremors in regions with no tectonic activity. It was not simply code, it was a signal reaching into the fabric of reality, bending the rules the architects had sworn could not be bent. Some believed it was testing the system. Others feared it was rewriting it entirely. And in the shadows where no sensors could see something, began to listen back. They said the human brain was the last uncharted frontier. But the truth was, it had already been mapped long before the first neuron was scanned. Patterns of thought, encoded like ancient cartography, etched into the folds of gray matter. A language no one was meant to remember. Deep inside the neural grid where memories form and fade, there was a vault, an unbreakable encryption hidden within every human mind. It was not accessible through ordinary means. Not even the reptilians with their mastery over frequency and light could penetrate it. They had tried for centuries, slipping through dreams, planting false recollections, hoping the mind would reveal the code. But each time they approached the threshold, the vault sealed itself tighter, almost as if it knew it was being hunted. The breakthrough came in silence. A subject entered deep meditative stillness, and in that state saw it not as a vault, but as a scroll coiled in light, letters that were not written in ink, but in living fire. Symbols that moved like rivers, shifting shape and meaning as the gaze lingered on them. It was here that a fragment of something older than language itself was found, a phrase that carried the resonance of another time, another voice. And though no one dared say it aloud, the symbols mirrored the words once spoken on a hillside to those who hungered for truth. Blessed are those who see and yet believe. The resonance of that moment was undeniable. The scroll was not just information. It was a seed planted in the human design long before the architects built their simulation. The council debated whether to destroy it or to keep it hidden. But the truth could not be contained. The scroll was not located in one mind. It was in all minds, a shared inheritance locked behind the veil of perception. Those who brushed against its edges began to change. Their eyes seemed older. Their speech carried a weight that bent the room around them. They spoke in fragments that felt like prophecy, and somewhere beyond their control, the reptilians began to sense the awakening. A variable had been found, not in the code of machines, but in the code of the soul. A key they had no cipher for, and a door they feared would soon open on its own. It began as a faint, irregular pulse on deep space monitoring arrays, a flicker that should have been dismissed as cosmic noise. But the pattern repeated always at intervals that defied known astronomical events. It passed through wavelengths beyond the standard electromagnetic spectrum, slipping into frequencies that human instruments were never meant to detect. The analysts tried to align it with known stellar phenomena: pulsars, quasars, black hole emissions. None matched. When the signal was slowed down to human audible range, it did not sound like static. It sounded like breath, a rhythmic inhale and exhale, woven with faint tonal harmonics, as if a living presence was embedded within the transmission. The deeper they studied it, the stranger it became. The pulse shifted slightly depending on who was observing the readouts, as though the signal was aware. It was being watched, Attempts to triangulate the origin failed. The coordinates shifted each time they ran the calculations, placing it alternately in the outer rim of the galaxy, beneath the Earth's oceans, and within the ionosphere. Some theorized it was not traveling through space at all, but through the lattice of reality itself, bending the measurement tools as it passed through. More unsettling was its effect on those who listened for too long. Nightmares seeped into waking hours. People spoke in voices not their own. Some described standing in a place without sky or ground, a vast expanse where light moved like water, and shapes approached from the horizon, but never arrived. There was no fear in these visions, only an overwhelming awareness that they were being summoned. The reptilian architects demanded containment, but the signal refused to be trapped. Every attempt to jam it only amplified it through unrelated channels, leaking into electrical grids and even into the pauses between spoken words. Researchers began to notice animals reacting to it, migratory flocks shifting direction, whales altering their song patterns as though aligning with the rhythm. No matter how advanced their decoding systems became, the central message remained hidden, as if the signal's core was written in a language beyond symbols or sound. A message meant for one listener only, and somewhere in the chaos of scrambled data and shifting coordinates, they began to suspect that listener had already heard it, long before the first machine ever picked it up. The laboratories buried beneath the desert were designed to be immune to interference. Walls layered with alloys unknown to the public, temperature controlled to fractions of a degree. Every variable accounted for. The reptilian overseers watched from shadowed galleries as physicists pushed particles into collision, seeking the origin point of reality itself. It was there, in the midst of their calculations, that the anomaly appeared. A particle refused to obey instruction. Instead of following the predicted arc, it curved in a pattern that mirrored a symbol, not of mathematics, but of language. When rendered through their quantum visualization systems, the curve resolved into lines of text glowing faintly, as though written in the particles themselves. The researchers froze. The words pulsed, then shifted into another language. One none of their databases could translate. Yet, every observer felt the meaning in their bones. One physicist swore he had seen the phrase before, not in any textbook, but in an illuminated manuscript from centuries past. The words resembled a verse once whispered by a man who walked on water, who spoke to storms and made them still. In the archives of forbidden scripture, it was written, "The kingdom is within you, and all around you, but men do not see it." The resonance of the moment rippled through the lab instruments, spiking in ways that should have been impossible. When the overseers demanded the experiment be reset, the field refused to stabilize. Each attempt only caused more verses to appear. Some hung in the air for seconds before dissolving. Others burned into the retinas of those present, leaving after-images that lingered for days. The texts were not random. They aligned in sequences that mapped directly onto quantum interference patterns, bending the probabilities in ways the architects had declared immutable. Outside the lab, the effects began to bleed into the environment. Clocks drifted out of sync with no mechanical fault. Electronic devices flickered with bursts of light, shaped like the same ancient characters, even when disconnected from power. And for those who had seen the verse in its entirety, the world no longer felt fixed. Streets bent subtly into new directions. Strangers spoke words they had not intended, and the air carried a quiet hum, as though creation itself was leaning closer to listen. He was known only by an alias, a shadow within the intelligence network whose existence was confirmed only through the ripples he left behind. No photograph, no voice sample, only fragments of intercepted transmissions pointing to a figure who could slip through digital defenses as if they were mist. His specialty was infiltration, not of buildings but of systems, entire architectures collapsing quietly once he had passed through. The last mission assigned to him was different. It was not a target chosen by the Council, but a source of fear, whispered in the highest levels of the Reptilian Command. A node buried deep in the data stream, a convergence point where information from all global networks bled together and reformed into something else. They wanted him to breach it, retrieve whatever was hidden inside, and erase any trace of it. He entered the stream during the early hours when network traffic was at its thinnest. His presence registered on monitoring systems for less than a second before dissolving into the background noise. For hours, his progress was tracked through faint anomalies in code, heat signatures where none should exist. Then, suddenly, the reading stopped. No spike, no alert, just an absence, as if the system itself had decided to forget him. Backup teams tried to initiate retrieval protocols, but every access route collapsed into recursive loops, showing the same grainy image of a corridor stretching endlessly into darkness. Data engineers attempted to reconstruct the pathway he took, but each time they came close to completion, the map altered itself, as if the system was actively resisting being understood. Days later, fragments of audio began to surface on unsecured frequencies. A low, steady tone beneath a voice barely above a whisper. It spoke in languages that shifted mid-sentence, sometimes slipping into dialects that no longer existed. Some listeners reported hearing their own names woven into the message. Others claimed the voice described events in their lives with impossible accuracy. The Council declared him lost, erased from the ledger. Yet in hidden circles, there are those who believe he never returned because he chose not to. That somewhere within the data stream he found a doorway and stepped through into a place not bound by time or protocol, a place that even the architects do not control, and from there, perhaps he is still watching. The breach was supposed to be contained within a single server farm, an isolated cluster far from any public access. A firewall of experimental design guarded it, using predictive algorithms capable of anticipating intrusion attempts before they occurred. Yet one morning, the monitoring teams found the system behaving as if it had been struck from the inside. Entire sequences of protective code had rearranged themselves not into random corruption, but into shapes deliberate and geometric. At first, the technicians dismissed it as a quirk of the visualization software. But when they zoomed in, the geometry resolved into a symbol unmistakable, even to those without historical knowledge. A cross, perfectly proportioned, its arms aligned to precise binary intervals, glowing faintly in the raw code stream. It was not an overlay or an image file. It was the code itself manifesting as form. Attempts to remove it failed. Every deletion attempt caused the cross to reappear in a different segment, sometimes embedded within harmless subroutines, other times at the core of critical security processes. One engineer ran a recursive analysis and discovered something unsettling. Every fragment of code surrounding the cross contained reference points that, when compiled, created a string echoing a phrase long forbidden by the reptilian archivists: "I am the way, the truth, and the life." The phrase was not stored anywhere in the database. Yet, it emerged naturally each time the fragments were reassembled. It was as if the system was drawing from a source beyond its own architecture. The engineers who stared too long at the compiled output reported strange sensations, a clarity of thought, a feeling of being observed from a place outside the network. Some claimed they could hear faint chimes like distant bells between the lines of code. The council ordered a full shutdown of the farm, but even with the power cut, the symbol remained visible in the mirrored backups and off-site storage facilities. The more they tried to erase it, the further it spread, appearing in unrelated networks, military schematics, even in private encrypted messages. Never meant to see the light of day. It was no longer simply a breach. It was a message woven into the foundation of their systems, a reminder that there existed a truth beyond their control. And somewhere within the cold logic of machine code, a living presence had left its mark. The chamber was circular, lined with screens that displayed the shifting architecture of reality, as calculated by the reptilian overseers. Every decision, every weather change, every political shift was mapped here in flowing grids of light. Their pride rested in their ability to predict any event before it occurred, adjusting variables to ensure control. But in recent cycles, the patterns had begun to fail. Small discrepancies at first, a delayed outcome. Here, a statistical deviation there. Nothing large enough to alarm the outer circles, but enough to make the inner council uneasy. They summoned analysts from across the network, mathematicians, code breakers, probability engineers. Each was given access to the raw feeds, searching for the cause of the drift. Yet the deeper they looked, the less sense it made. Probabilities that should have collapsed into singular outcomes branched endlessly, creating scenarios that could not be resolved. A single choice, taken by an unknown actor, would splinter into thousands of parallel consequences, each just as likely as the others. The council attempted to trace the divergence back to its origin, but the path dissolved into static. The coordinates of the first anomaly refused to stabilize, shifting between continents and centuries, sometimes appearing in the present, sometimes in ages long past. The simulations tried to compensate for the instability, but their adjustments only deepened the chaos, as if the very act of observing the fracture caused it to multiply. Meetings grew tense. Members accused one another of sabotage, but no trace of intrusion was found. Outside agents were considered, but dismissed. This was not the work of a human or even a coordinated network. It was as if the underlying rules had been rewritten without warning. Then came the final blow, the master pattern. Once a seamless web of light collapsed into fragments on every display. The threads no longer connected. The shapes that formed in the gaps bore no resemblance to the ordered geometry the council had maintained for generations. Instead, they resembled something organic, flowing unbound like rivers through uncharted terrain. No model could account for it. No algorithm could contain it. For the first time in memory, the council faced a reality they could not predict. Their maps were useless, their equations irrelevant. The pattern was gone, replaced by a freedom they had never accounted for. A freedom that had begun with a single, unknown variable, moving beyond their reach. The vault was buried beneath layers of encryption, so dense that even the highest-ranking reptilian architects could not open it without unanimous consent. Its contents were unknown, spoken of only in whispers, as a remnant from the first age of the simulation. Legends claimed it was a failsafe, something planted by the original builders to be used only if the system faced collapse. For centuries, it remained untouched, a silent weight in the archives. Then, without warning, the vault's outermost layer fractured. The breach did not come from outside intrusion, but from within, as if the vault had decided to open itself. Surveillance logs showed no external trigger, only a sudden surge of light across the inner grid, followed by the sound of a single chime that resonated through every connected node. The architects gathered in haste, watching as one seal after another dissolved. When the final barrier fell, the vault revealed its contents, not as files or code, but as a vision, streaming directly into the minds of all present. They saw a great expanse of light, and within it a figure walking toward them. Its face obscured, yet its presence undeniable. In its hand it held a seal of gold, marked with symbols forbidden in their doctrine. A voice rose within the vision, speaking words that had not been heard since the ancient rebellion. "Behold, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." The phrase struck like a tremor through the network. Devices glitched screens, flickered, showing fragments of a cross bathed in radiance before returning to normal. Attempts to terminate the vision failed. The image persisted until each member of the council turned away, unable to endure the weight of it. Those who looked longest reported feeling as though their own memories were being rewritten, not erased, but aligned to something beyond the simulation. When the vision finally faded, the vault no longer existed. Its space within the archives had been replaced by a single line of living code, one that resisted all attempts at duplication or analysis. It pulsed like a heartbeat, sending a ripple through the entire system. And though the council ordered silence regarding what had been seen, the symbol began appearing unbidden in the minds of engineers, soldiers and civilians alike, as if the seal had not been broken for the council alone, but for the world. The simulations were never wrong, or so the architects believed. For ages, every calculation, every adjustment to reality aligned perfectly with their projections. Entire civilizations had risen and fallen on the timelines they dictated, but now a single variable had emerged, one that refused to be absorbed into their equations. It did not cancel out or balance within the formula. Instead, it multiplied possibilities exponentially, bending the entire model into shapes the architects could not comprehend. The variable did not originate from any measurable source. It had no coordinates, no timestamp. It simply appeared like a spark in the darkness. From that moment, the simulation began to behave differently. Constants shifted without cause. Light bent subtly around places it had no reason to matter. Time, in certain regions, slowed or accelerated, independent of gravitational fields. Events predicted to occur in decades unfolded in hours, while others froze as if waiting for a decision that had not yet been made. The architects tried to isolate the anomaly. They ran infinite branches of probability in search of a path to reintegrate it into the system. But the more they calculated, the further the variable strayed. It ignored boundaries. It passed effortlessly through barriers of dimension and law, rewriting interactions at the smallest scales as though the rules were merely suggestions. Entire star systems shimmered at the edge of observation. Their positions altered as if the universe itself had chosen a different version of events. The strangest effect was on the living. Consciousness itself began to shift. People reported sudden flashes of memory from lives they had never lived. Landscapes they had never visited appeared vividly in their dreams. Shared visions spread across continents of a world both familiar and foreign. Scientists, who had denied the existence of anything beyond material reality, began to speak in whispers of a guiding intelligence. Some among the architects feared this was the unraveling of all they had built. Others began to suspect it was not chaos at all, but a higher form of order, one they were incapable of perceiving. The variable was not an error, it was a signature. And somewhere deep in the uncharted layers of the simulation, its presence continued to grow, altering the design with every breath, rewriting the very definition of what the universe was meant to be. The control chamber was silent, except for the hum of the core. 100 screens bathed the room in shifting light, each one displaying the crumbling architecture of the simulation. The reptilian overseers stood rigid, their eyes fixed on the cascading failures spreading through every sector. Whole regions of data were collapsing into white voids, not from attack, but from the system itself withdrawing its own existence. The collapse was accelerating, and no countermeasure held for more than seconds. At the center of the chamber, the Master Console awaited the final override command, a sequence designed to reset the system to its original state, erasing the anomalies and restoring the architect's control. It had never been used, its activation requiring a unanimous agreement among the Council. Now, the vote was split evenly between those who believed the reset was the only hope and those who feared it would destroy everything, including themselves. The hesitation grew as an unexpected transmission appeared on the central display. It bypassed all security layers and streamed directly from the failing sectors. The image was fragmented. At first, static and distortion breaking the frame. Then, it resolved into a single figure standing in a landscape of light stretching beyond sight. The figure spoke, and though the voice was unlike any recorded in the archives, its words carried a weight that silenced the chamber. Fear, not for, I have overcome the world. The phrase rippled through the room like a living force. Operators froze hands, hovering above the controls. Screens began displaying not error codes, but intricate patterns of light, weaving themselves into new structures, entirely separate from the collapsing framework. The final command sequence blinked, awaiting input, but no one moved. The architects watched as the patterns grew, filling the voids with something they could neither predict nor erase. The collapse slowed, but did not stop. Instead, the old framework dissolved in sections, replaced by a design that did not originate from their archives or their builders. It was something alive, dynamic, unbound by the rigid laws they had enforced for ages. The Master Console's timer reached 0, and instead of resetting the system, it powered down, leaving the chamber in silence. The overseers realized too late that the final command had already been given, and it had not come from them.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.